Good evening, everybody. So, we began talking about the problem of evil last week, and we made certain. If you are following us online and you can hear, please just send a message in the chat section. So we made certain progress with regard to our exploration of the problem of evil, and then we said that there is usually a difference between the intellectual problem and the emotional problem. So some people have a problem, they have an emotional problem with a God that permits suffering, right? While for some people, they cannot reconcile the logic behind the fact that God exists or suffering exists. So I said that part of the things you need to do is you need to be able to discern where the problem lies. You need to be able to know what the person's problem is. Especially because a lot of times, the people don't even know what the problem is. Yeah, a lot of times they don't even know what the problem is. But it's your job to be able to find out where the problem is. And that's why you use questions. Okay? So the issue is it that you don't think that it is possible for God and evil to exist? Or is it that you just don't like the idea of a God that allows evil to exist? So that's kind of how we want to start off. And then I said that there's a difference between moral evil and natural evil. And with moral evil, in fact, moral evil is not a problem at all. The reason why moral evil is not a problem is because moral evil is caused by free will. People freely decide to do what they want to do. So if someone steals, or someone kills, or someone rapes somebody, that is moral evil. Natural evil is the one that we really don't have control over. So you have stuff like tsunamis, like earthquakes, like floods, like hurricanes, and all of that. That is evil and it produces suffering, but that's not necessarily caused by any human being. Right? So that poses more of a challenge than moral evil. But I'm hoping that we can make progress today. Maybe even get to where we talk about natural evil at all. So we said that under the intellectual problem of evil, there is the logical problem and the probabilistic problem. The logical problem is when the atheist says that if God exists, suffering cannot exist, or if suffering exists, God cannot exist. And then the probabilistic problem is when the person says something like, if God exists, then it's very probable that suffering will not exist. Or if suffering exists, then it's very probable that God will not exist. So, with the second version of the problem, the probabilistic problem version, the atheist has a lesser burden of proof to shoulder than in the logical problem. Because in the logical problem, they are telling you that it is impossible for God and suffering to coexist, right? So do we get it up until that point? Okay. So the trouble began when we started looking at the argument. And like I said, what we are doing now is we're trying to respond to an objection. So when someone talks about the problem of evil, it's not like they have a fully crafted argument, right? They just have objections. And of course, they're going to relay their objections in the form of statements. But because we know how logic works, it is our job to make it into an argument to see whether it will work or not, whether it is sound or whether it is valid and all of that. If it is not valid or if it's not sound, then we know that the reasoning is poor. Because when we're looking at logic, we're not looking at a way to assess arguments. We're looking at a way to assess reasoning. So arguments are a tool that we use to assess reasoning. So if you made a statement to me, or if you made a couple of statements to me, whether they are in an argument form or not, if I want to assess how you are reasoning, what I will do is I will put it into an argument. If the argument is valid and is sound, then your reasoning is proper. If the argument is sound, or if the argument is valid and is not sound, then your reasoning is improper. If the argument is invalid, then your reasoning is not proper. So what arguments do is they help us to assess reasoning. What logic does is that it helps us to assess reasoning, not necessarily arguments. Okay? So the arguments are a tool that we use to assess reasoning. Now, I said that because what we have are statements, we need to turn it into an argument to see whether the reasoning makes sense or not. But the statements that the atheist will give as their objection is not going to be enough for us to make any conclusion from. So what we need to do is we need to insert certain premises to help us get a clearer picture of what is going on. Right? And I gave you that example. I gave you an example with that last week. So let's look at it again, because we have to look at it. So the two statements that the atheist would give is that an all-loving, all-powerful God exists. Number two, evil exists. So when they make this statement, they make it look like there is a contradiction between these two statements. Meanwhile, we saw last week that there is no explicit contradiction between them. What they are implying is that there is sort of an implicit contradiction. And because we want to see what that contradiction is, we are going to supply premises to the statements. We are going to supply other statements to the statements to make it obvious, right? And we supplied two statements. If God is all powerful, He can create any world He wants. That was the first statement we supplied. And the second statement we supplied was, if God is all loving, He prefers a world without suffering. So those are the two statements we supplied. Now, if all four premises are true, then this argument is sound and the reasoning is valid. But what we are trying to do is to show that these four premises are not true. The first premise is true. The second premise is untrue. The third premise is true. The fourth premise is untrue. And because of that, we cannot say that this argument is sound. Therefore, we cannot say that it makes sense to believe that God and evil are incompatible of existing together or coexisting. So do you get it up until this point? Avril, do you get it? Okay. So where we had an issue last time was that first statement we supplied. If God is all powerful, He can create any world He wants. Right? If God is all powerful, He can create any world He wants. And what I began to say was that God cannot create any world He wants if certain things are going to be part of those worlds, or if certain things are going to be a part of the world, right? And one of the things that complicates the issue is this little thing that is called free will. The moment free will comes into the equation, then everything changes. It is such that free will can determine the kind of world that will exist, and the absence of free will can determine the kind of world that will exist. You know? So, in a world where there is free will, there is certainly going to be some people that are going to exercise their free will against the person that instituted free will. Like my mother. I like to use this example because it's true. When I was growing up, I didn't like arranging my room. I still don't. I still don't like arranging my room. I really didn't see the point to wash my clothes and fold them in a box. When I want to wear them, I'm going to have to bring them out and iron them. What kind of... Okay, hang them. Yeah, whatever. However you think about it. But the conventional idea was that when you wash your clothes and you bring them in, you iron your clothes, then you fold them or you hang them. And I didn't see how that was a good use of my time. I still don't see it. I mean, if I'm traveling, I iron my clothes before I travel. When I get to the place, I still iron them. Do you get the point? But I have to iron them before leaving my house, because it's possible that there will be no way I can iron there. So that makes sense. But if I'm in my house, if I want to wear the clothes, there's going to be light. I'm going to iron the clothes. So why do I need... Do you get my... That's how I'm thinking about it.
Yes, your point.
Alright, yes. My mother still doesn't agree with me till date. She still says that my wife will have problem, but we'll be fine. The reason why my room could be scattered was because my mother gave me free will to choose to arrange the room or not. So she will tell you, arrange your room, arrange your room, arrange your room. If I didn't arrange my room and someone comes into the room, the person can look at her and say, this room is scattered. Why did you cause this room to be scattered? She didn't cause the room to be scattered, but she actually did, you know.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Because she gave me the ability to choose to arrange the room or not. You know. What it means therefore is that everywhere there is free will, there will be some people who are going to choose to do right. There will be some people who are going to choose to do wrong. Do you get? So the presence of free will ensures that the world cannot be a certain way. So if there is free will in a world, there will be evil in a world, especially when the people in that world are not exactly all good people. Now, I'm choosing my words very carefully because there will be free will in heaven. But the difference between what we have here on earth and what we'll have in heaven is that the people that will be in heaven are not the people, not everybody on earth will be in heaven. You get? Not everybody on earth will be in heaven. The people that are going to be in heaven are people who have decided to give their lives to God. So there are people who have decided to choose God as an act of their free will. That's why when we get to heaven, nobody is going to sin. It's not because God is going to take away our free will at the point. Right? It's just because we have used our free will to choose God at that time. Right? And so because of that, we are a certain kind of people. We are a certain kind of people. Can you remember when we were talking about possible worlds? And I said that a possible world is... we're talking about possible worlds, but we're referring to the actual world. And I said that this actual world is the way the world has been and the way the world will be. So the actual world actually starts from when God created to when we're going to go into eternity. That is this actual world. So heaven is not a different world than this world in that sense. Right? In the way we're thinking about it now, of course heaven is a different world. Because if you die now, you're going to go to that world, right? But I'm saying that it's a continuum. It's a continuum. Okay? So when we're talking of the actual world, we're looking at before man fell, now, and after Jesus comes again. You understand the point? Okay? So that it is one world. So that what God does is that He ensures that the people that show up in that world are people who chose Him as an act of their free will in this world. Let me give you another way to illustrate it. Imagine you come to me, you're looking for a job, right? And I tell you that part of your job description, your job description is you have to study apologetics 7 hours a day, you have to pray 4 hours a day, and you have to do any other thing that I assign you to do. You know, there are certain jobs that have those kind of clauses, and any other thing that the boss assigns you to do. A lot of times it's a trap, but you want to work now, so you enter the job. There are certain of those kinds of jobs. If you take a job, they list 12 things as part of your job description. Then the last one is, and any other thing the boss assigns you to do. If the boss tells you to wash his car, meanwhile, it's not part of your job description. You know that it's captured in that last phrase, right? If you go to court and say, this guy is using me beyond my job description, you are going to lose. The reason is because as an act of your free will, you signed a contract that said that there is this thing that is called any other thing that you are assigned to do. You do it. Do you get the point? Now, when we see Jesus, something is going to happen to us. The Bible says in 1 John that, beloved, now are we the sons of God, even though it does not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when we see him, we shall be like him, because we will see him as he is. Right? Now the Bible makes that statement, and that's a very profound statement. It means that when we see Jesus face to face, something is going to happen to us. We are going to change. Do you get? We are going to change. But the only reason why God will be justified in the fact that he changes us into the kinds of beings that cannot sin is because as an act of our free will, we have committed to him. So we chose him and we said to him, do whatever you want to do. And he said, okay, I will make you the kind of people that cannot sin. So when we're stepping out from this world and we're stepping into eternity, or we're stepping into that part of this world now, something is going to happen to us. We're going to change. We're not going to lose our free will, but we're going to be beings that are incapable of committing sin. Do you get it? It's kind of how God hides himself, right? And God reveals himself. So God has revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ. God has revealed himself in the word, in the scriptures here. So you know about general revelation and special revelation, you know all of that. But the ultimate revelation of God was in the person of Jesus Christ when he walked upon the face of the earth. And now we have the written word, the scriptures, as a witness to the living word. Right? The scriptures bear testimony of him. They are witness to the living word. We have the scriptures as the revelation of God to us. Right? We have the scriptures as the revelation of God to us. What okay, because I don't want to say something that we'll now use the whole of today to explain. Leave the matter. God, when he instituted free will, ensured that there are certain kinds of worlds that cannot be created. Because like I said last week, God cannot make you freely do something. Simply because make you and freely do are a contradiction. They are an explicit contradiction. Right? And there are certain things that are contradictions, and when those things are contradictions, even God cannot do them because those things do not exist. We gave some examples last week. Right? Do we follow to this point? So the issue was, if God is all powerful, he can create any world he wants. Right? And I've tried to show you that because of free will, then this statement is not exactly true. And if this statement is not true, then it means the argument fails. And if the argument fails, then it means the argument is unsound. And so the atheistic objection is flawed. So if someone comes to tell you that God cannot exist because evil exists, you need to ask the person a question. The question you need to ask the person is, are you trying to say that if God existed, then God will be able to create any kind of world he wants? And then the person will say yes. That's usually the response. Yes, God can create any kind of world he wants. And then you're like, okay, but if the world had to have free will in it, what will God do? At the point where free will comes into the picture, everything changes. And we have said why free will come into the picture? It's because God is love. And because he is love, God cannot do anything else. That's his nature. He's a morally perfect being. And because he's a morally perfect being, he's a loving being. And because he's a loving being, he's going to have a world where love exists. And the only way love can exist is where there is free will. Right? It means that certain kinds of worlds are out of the picture. So there is a possible world in which everybody is a robot and everybody loves God. Adam never fell. You know why Adam never fell? Because there was no tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden. There is that possible world. But God cannot create that world if he wants free will to be in the world. Right? And we have said why free will should be in the world is because free will is the only thing that makes love possible. Do you get it? So is there any challenge with that statement? Now. Do you have a challenge with that statement? Where is Juliet? Juliet should... Okay. It is well with her. The second statement is this. If God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. Let me say something before I say that. You know how we're saying that God should be able to create any kind of world he wants, right? And then we say that free will cannot exist with making you to do something. So people are responsible for their actions, people are responsible for their behavior. Because God has given us free will, we're going to be responsible for how we act. And God cannot make us freely do something. Do you understand that? God cannot make us freely do something. But if somebody says God can make us freely do something, then it means God can do the logically impossible. Right? And if God can do the logically impossible, then the problem of evil ceases to exist. You probably didn't get it. If God can do the logically impossible, what's the problem if God exists and evil exists? I mean, God can do anything he wants. He can do the logically impossible. So how is this an objection to God's existence? Mind you, this is not an objection to the niceness of God. This is an objection to the existence of God. If God exists, right, and evil exists, and you believe it is possible for God to do something that is logically impossible, then there's no problem. So why are we talking about this? We just agree that God has decided to do nonsense. This speaks to the existence of God. I'm saying that either way, this argument does not show that God cannot exist if evil exists. Yes, that's the first premise you suggested. This one. If God is all powerful, he can create any world he wants. If God can do anything he wants, then God can do evil. And then there shouldn't be a problem with that. Right? So if the person says God can do the logically impossible, we win. If the person says God cannot do the logically impossible, we win. Either way, this argument is very poor. Do you get it? Do you understand it? Do you understand this last thing I said? Okay, if you don't get it, don't worry. It's really not important because we've already shown how to. So, this second statement, if God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. True or false? I want to hear what you think. If God is all loving, he would prefer a world without suffering. True or false? We answered it. Oh, really? Yeah. We answered it last week. In passing.
You said that it's false.
Okay.
God can use suffering
to bring about. So there's something that John Lennox. I know I've read it in a couple of John Lennox books, but I think that it's C.S. Lewis that actually said it first. About, imagine you were a child and your mother took you to the dentist, and then your mother brought you into a room and left you in the room with a man that was wearing a white coat,
and the man used some very dangerous instruments and did something to you that caused you a lot of pain. And like, how can my mom do this to me? How can my mom do this to me? And then you're leaving, and then you see your mom paying the man. You know, when the thing was happening, you were first saying that, why would my mom do this? Why would my mom do this? You thought your mother was just wicked. Then when you saw your mom paying the man, you were convinced that she's not your mother, that you were adopted. Did you have those kind of times when you were growing up that you felt that, I really don't think I'm my parents' child? I harbored that thing for a long time now. Like deep down, but I just felt that I'm not their child. Maybe they found me somewhere or something. Then I'll now be looking for resemblance. I don't even resemble my brother like that. I'm sure he's a real child. Me, I'm just... They found me. They used to... Oh no, they beat the living daylights out of me. But I mean, I deserved it. Thinking about it, I was a very mischievous stubborn child. I was horribly mischievous. Every mischief you see in me now is the beaten down version. Like even me, I knew at that time that this thing you are doing is worthy of flogging, you know. But I just had to do it. I just had to. It was no, my children should not be like me. It should not cause problem for me. I mean, you know, at that point, you now start feeling like I'm not my father's child. He's paying this guy that caused me a lot of pain, right? But you were too young or you were too ignorant to understand that what they were doing was actually saving you from a lot of pain. But the only way they could save you from a lot of pain was to cause you a lot of pain. Again, somebody can now say, are you saying that God cannot save you from pain without causing you pain? What kind of God would that be? Is that God going to be an omnipotent God? You know, is that the only way God can save me from pain? By causing me pain? The answer to the question is there is something called free will. That's the answer to the question. Again, free will comes into the picture. So if God says go here and you decide to not go there, so God says go to that place, then you are going this way, and God knows that a car is going to jam you on the road, and God is telling you go here, go here, go here, and you are not turning, you still keep going. So the only way God can ensure that that car does not jam you, He needs something to catch your attention. Your phone will fall down and break. So when the screen of your phone broke, you were there for like 2 seconds and you were mourning. And you were like, what kind of thing is this? I even did morning devotion before leaving the house this morning. And then as you are saying it, the trailer just runs and hits the person in front of you. You would have been the person there. But the only way God could have caught your attention was to do something that will hurt you. If not, you would not have listened. And I'm sure that in your experience, you know these kinds of things that I'm talking about. That God was telling you, you did not hear. Maybe you saw one boy, you liked the boy. Then you decided to take it to the Lord in prayer. When you went to the Lord said, no, he's not the one for you. You say, but I like him. The Lord said he's not the one. You say, but I like him. You say, the way Avril is smiling. Anyway, so you kept doing the thing. Then you started chatting with the guy, you know. Then the guy too, you know how it used to be now when you just meet someone for the first time. You know how very, you know, you don't know. May the Lord give you understanding. Everything about the person fascinates you. Yeah. You're like, oh God, see her smile. On a normal day, you hate the smile, but because, in fact, after 2 weeks, you're going to hate the smile again. But because you just met this person and you know how you say that she's so intense, I love her, she's so intense. Then after 2 weeks, you're like, she's too much. What's the problem? You kept doing that thing. God say no, God say no, God say no. Then God saw that if you follow this boy, one day he will travel to Lagos. He will now say you should come and see him. Then when you are flying, your plane will crash and you die. So God will allow the boy to break your heart. A broken heart is better than death. Now think about it. If you have a heartbreak, it's better than you are dead. If you have a heartbreak, you'll be fine eventually. I mean, no matter how long it takes, even if it takes 2 years, you get over it. But you'll be alive. That's the point. There are a lot of things that God permits because that's the only way to get our attention. That's the only way to ensure that we dodge something in front, but because of free will, because ultimately we will do what we choose to do, a lot of times God is restricted and he can only do it by causing us pain. So, John Lennox says that when you hear preachers saying God doesn't cause pain, he laughs. It's like you've never been to the dentist. Because the dentist can have good intentions and cause you a whole lot of pain. Right? And is that, you don't understand?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying he's using that dentist thing too often. Like, is it because he had an experience when
Well, I know that it was C.S. Lewis that pushed the whole dentist thing, and John Lennox is like a student of C.S. Lewis. He was actually his teacher. C.S. Lewis taught him in school. And John Lennox adores C.S. Lewis a whole lot. Like, we all should, but John Lennox is a real fan. So, it's possible he had an experience, I don't know, right? But then, like I said, I've said the difference, because if you're talking to someone and you bring this dentist analogy, they tell you that, but the dentist is not omnipotent. God is supposed to be omnipotent, right? So why should God have to use? The answer is free will. When free will comes into the equation, eventually you are going to do what you want to do. And a lot of times we do things that God doesn't want us to do. We do things that God knows we should not do, despite his best warnings and all of that. And sometimes the only way to ensure it happens is to allow this thing to happen, right? So if you say that, what we're looking at is, if God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. We're saying that this statement is not necessarily true. God prefers a world where people love him. That's what God prefers. And it's not entirely selfish. Right? I know that there's a selfish component to the fact that God wants people to love him. Right? But that selfishness is a good selfishness. It's a good selfishness because God knows that the way you are, the only way you will make sense is if you love him. So it's a selfishness that is actually prompted by your best interests. So God will insist that you love him because that's the only way you will be happy. Do you get the point? So when you read scriptures like Revelation chapter 4, when it says, you are worthy to receive all glory and all of that, for you have created all things, they are and were created for your pleasure. When you read that kind of scripture, people is like, hey, God is so narcissistic. God is all about himself. God is the most self-centered being in the universe. Well, exactly. What is he supposed to be centered around? You? If he's self-centered, he has every right to be. Right? If God is self-centered, if I were God, I would be self-centered as well. Yes, I will be. Because I am omnipotent, I am omnipresent, I am omniscient, and I am morally perfect. Am I supposed to be centered around morally imperfect beings? Or am I supposed to be centered around contingent beings? I am necessary. I don't need any of them to exist. The only thing I need to exist is me. So, if there was one being I should be centered around, I'll be centered around myself. I'll be self-centered. Right? But I'm saying that even if God decides to be selfish for his own selfish purposes, it's justified. God is the only being that has a right to be selfish. Right? But we are saying that that's not what God even does. When we are talking of the relationship between God and man, the selfishness of God is actually targeted at your best interest. The selfishness of God is because he knows that without him you will be incomplete and you will be lost. So God ensures that you choose him simply because of you and not really because of him. It's not like if God has one follower in the world, God will feel less of himself than if he had 1 million followers. He's not insecure like that. Do you get the point? But he knows that the only way to have these 1 million people make sense is if they choose him. So he will go out of his way a lot of times to ensure that they choose him, which is exactly why Jesus came to die. But that was God going out of his way, actually. So If God is all loving, he will prefer a world without suffering. No. If God is all loving, he will prefer a world where the people are fine, where the people are happy. Unfortunately, there is no way to be happy without being holy. Unfortunately. There is no such thing as happiness that God created, that God can give to you and say, take, be happy. There is no such thing. The only way to find happiness is in him. He is the center of all good. He is the locus of all good. Right? He is the place where everything that is good finds its source and its bearing. So if you are going to be happy, you are going to have to locate yourself in him. And if God will have suffering to bring that about, well, it's a fair bargain. Final objection to that statement. Imagine a world where there was no courage. A world where there was no bravery. Imagine a world where Chadwick Boseman's death did not mean anything. Simply because there was nothing like being a hero. And if there's nothing like being a hero, the Black Panther does not exist. Imagine that kind of world. Do you think that world will be better than this world? A world where we cannot appreciate courage. I was watching this film. What's the name of this film? Hacksaw Ridge. You've seen it? Have you seen Hacksaw Ridge? Hacksaw Ridge. Go and see it. Okay. Yeah, is it not Hacksaw Ridge? That's the name. Hack. Saw. Yeah. Yeah, you should see the movie. So it's like, I think what I'll be doing is that every day I'll be recommending one movie for, because I don't know what people are watching. What are you watching? Tom and Jerry. So the movie is like a depiction of a real life story and all of that. And I was watching that movie and I couldn't keep the emotions together. I didn't cry. But it was really, no, I didn't. I didn't cry. But it was really emotional. Part of what made it emotional was the fact that this thing was happening. This thing really happened. Like, it's not just a story. No, it's not scary. It's not like a horror film. No. It's like, it was like a war movie. So this guy enlisted to join the army, but he didn't want to carry a gun. So he wanted to be a medic, and he was posted to, I think, Japan or somewhere. That was for World War, one of the World Wars. That World War I or World War II, one of the World Wars. And so this guy saved 7-something people of that ridge. Yeah, 7-something people. He's a hero. The only reason he can be a hero is because a war existed. Look at a world, think of a world without courage. Think of a world without bravery. Think of a world without sacrifice. Think of a world without love. And imagine if the suffering in the world should be done away with. If all the suffering in the world is done away with, all of these things would not exist. We would not know that they existed. What kind of world would that be?
Its own kind of world.
Is that?
Its own kind of world.
Yeah, but it would be a different kind of world. So now you're thinking about it. In fact, it will not be a different kind of world. It will be a different world. It will be a different world from this world. As in, to be a totally... Imagine a world where we didn't have hero movies. Just movies, so forget the real thing. Imagine that kind of world. It's going to be a different world than this world. Right? And I'm not even saying that all of the suffering in the world is worth these kinds of things. I'm just saying that there is a case to be made for this last statement, that if God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. That statement is not true, necessarily. If God is all loving, God's goal will be to get people that will love him. That's what it means to be all loving, right? And because God exists in a place that we don't, no soul is lost to God. So if someone suffers and dies, God has all of eternity to compensate the person. Do you get the point? Because suffering is temporal. Suffering happens for a limited period of time. I was asking someone not too long ago, I can't even remember who he was, if you had to choose 100 years of suffering and 1,000 years of bliss, or 100 years of bliss and 1,000 years of suffering, which would you choose? If you have sense, you choose the first one. I will suffer for 100 years, then enjoy for 1,000 years back. They say yes. You say okay. Or they tell you that you enjoy for 100 years and you suffer for 1,000 years. Which would you choose? You choose the first. Right? Yeah, so that's like on the other. So when I say 1,000 years now, it's just an analogy. I'm just trying to show you the difference in time based on what you would prefer. When we're talking about God, you may not even live up to 100 years. Number one. Number two, when you cross that divide, it's not 1,000 years. It is timelessness. The fact that time no longer exists. So if I had to trade it, let me suffer in this world for 80 years. I will not marry, nothing. I will suffer and die. Then when I finish flexing, I will choose that one. But you see, because God is on the other side as well, the soul is not lost to God. So saying that God necessarily prefers a world without suffering is not true. Right? Finally, the conception of the Christian God is a holy God. And that God wants people to be holy. Again, because that's the only way they will be happy. God is not primarily interested in your happiness. I hope you know. God's plan is not that you'll be happy. If you are happy, it's a side effect of something. Right? So, it's not like God is like, how do we make Juliet happy today? Let's see. Nah, that's not God. That's the tooth fairy. That's not God. God's plan is, how do we make Juliet look more like Jesus today? Say, what will we do? Say, let her beat her small. We teach her not to come late. You're like, yeah, let's do that. That is, yeah, that's what a loving God will do. That's what a good God will do. Think about it. You have two tailors or two, whatever they call them, fashion designers. So that's what they call themselves nowadays. But we're Nigerians, so they're tailors. So you have two tailors, right? And then you downloaded a clothes from Instagram. Then you gave two of them to make the clothes for you. You know what you ordered versus what you got. Now you ordered something, then when you saw it, you were wondering if it's the same network. And if it's the same WhatsApp you and the tailor were on. Then you know some tailors, they will not even tell you that you will like this one or you will like it. You know. So, you have one tailor that makes this cloth, but it doesn't look anything like what you wanted, right? And then you have another tailor that makes this cloth, and it looks exactly like what you wanted. Which tailor would you say is a good tailor? The second one, right? Now, what if you took this clothes from the first tailor and you took it to the second tailor and said, adjust this clothes for me and make it look like this clothes? And the second tailor says, fine. What would the tailor do? The tailor will lose the clothes, right? So the tailor is going to inflict damage upon that cloth first. Why is he doing this thing? It's because he's good. That's the reason. His goodness that is causing. If the cloth could cry, the clothes will start complaining, say, bros, how far now? I beg now. I beg. They sewed me. They are finished. I went through pain and they have stitched me up. And what you are doing now is that you are taking away all of the threads one by one. You are losing everything again so that you can start again. The reason why the tailor is doing all of that is because the tailor is a good tailor. I'm saying that if God is a good God, then if you have done something, God can lose the threads. It may cost you pain, no, but it's fine. The trouble is that he's a good God. That's the trouble. And we're reading Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis makes this same statement in Mere Christianity, where he says that God is not, you come to God, maybe you came to God because you lie a lot. So you wanted somebody to help you from your lying. Then you came to Jesus. Jesus said, don't worry, I'll take away your lying. Then Jesus takes away the lying. Then you're not telling him, it's okay, you should stop. Now you see this immorality, you like it. But that line, you should just hold it. Jesus is not like that. If you come, he will take everything. You know why? It's because he's good. Unfortunately. So, from a Christian perspective, if God is all loving, he prefers a world without suffering. That's not entirely true. And so this argument fails. So the logical problem of evil, where people say if God exists, evil should not exist, doesn't pass. Right? Or if evil exists, then God does not exist. It doesn't pass. It doesn't fly. Do you understand it to this point? Right. Okay. Are there any questions on these two statements, finally, before we move to the next version of the problem? Okay, let me say something about, there's something that is called chaos theory. Or, okay, now I'll say it in the next. So what we've looked at so far is we've looked at the objection, this logical version of the objection to God's existence on the strength of the presence of evil. Right? What we're looking at next is the probabilistic version. Now, what the probabilistic version says is that it is not probable. It is not probable that God exists because evil exists. You know, we said that the first version, the logical version, the atheist will have to shoulder a high burden of proof. The atheist will have to show that it is impossible for God and evil to coexist. And we've seen in these arguments that is not, you really can't do that. Not from the statements that they are making. So, the probabilistic version, they now dial it down a bit and they say, okay, well, it's not like it's impossible, but it's improbable. So, when you're talking of probable, improbable, you're looking at probabilities, right? So, you see on the strength of the evidence, the odds are that God exists and evil exists are way less than the odds that God exists or that evil exists, you know. So on this second version of the problem, the burden of proof that they shoulder is reduced. How do we respond to these claims? When people say it's not probable that God exists, it's very likely that God does not exist because of all of this. It's very likely. How do we respond? Number one, human limitations. Human limitations. When we say human limitations, what we are saying is that we are not in a position to make that kind of statement. We are not in a position to say that it is improbable that God lacks sufficient reason for allowing evil. I'm going to explain because number one, human limitations. So number one, we are not in that kind of position. We don't have enough knowledge to be able to make these kinds of statements. Now, some people say that, hey, so we're just trying to say God is mysterious and whatever. That's not what we're saying. We're not talking about God. We're saying God can have sufficient reasons to allow evil in the world, but we are not sufficient enough to know all of the reasons that God can have. Do you get the point? You don't get the point. Human limitation. Okay, so let me talk about chaos theory. I'm going to talk about it before now. So there's something that is called chaos theory, right? In chaos theory, it tells us that something as little as me dropping this earpiece on the floor can trigger a chain of events that will lead to an earthquake. For example. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So the people that talk about it a lot, they use the wings of a butterfly, the flapping wings of a butterfly. Because unfortunately or fortunately, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another, right? That's like a scientific law. Let's not talk about it. Let's just agree that it's true, right? It can never be created nor destroyed. So if a butterfly should flap its wings, something is going to happen to the wind. Energy is going to be created. Or energy not created. The biological energy of the butterfly flapping its wings has transformed that energy now to a kinetic energy, right? That finds itself in the wind now. Now, that energy is there. that energy cannot be destroyed. So it will have to be transformed to another kind of energy. It will have to find its way elsewhere. And there are studies that show that it is very possible that an earthquake happened simply because a butterfly in a different continent flapped its wings. Yeah. It's crazy, but it's true.
Is that true?
Yeah, of course it's true.
It's an assumption.
Oh yeah. No. They are not saying that earthquake was caused by this butterfly. No. They are saying that it is very possible that what actually set this earthquake in motion was a series of events that can be traced back to this butterfly. So something happened. You know how you have dominoes lined up, and then you just tip one of them, and it just keeps going like that, and then you have, boom, that thing. That's what chaos theory says. Like I said, it's a theory, it's not like a law or something. But it makes a lot of sense. Think about it.
So which one is the theory?
Chaos.
What does it state?
Oh no, I don't know what it states. I just know what it means.
Okay, what does it mean?
So the explanation is that things that are seemingly little can have or can trigger a chain of events that lead to massive consequences, basically. Right? So the whole butterfly of the whole wing of the butterfly thing is kind of how it is classically put. Now, who has watched Endgame? I love Endgame. No, I don't love Endgame like that, because it's a time travel movie. I felt that they could have done better, but it's not bad, you know. It's not so bad. So I love Endgame, but not like love. I love Infinity War more than Endgame. Lamti, do you know what we're talking about? They are movies.
Stop talking about movies.
No, we can't stop talking about movies, right? I think that, let me tell you why I use movies a lot. I think that the moment an idea enters into contemporary culture, it is widespread. The moment an idea gets into a song, it is widespread. The moment an idea, that's one of the reasons I like the Forever Young song. I'm not endorsing Jay-Z or anything, that's not the point, but I like the song because that song paints a picture. That picture is going to happen. That's our goal. Not goal, but it's going to happen to us. We're going to be forever young at some point, right? He just won't be unless he becomes a Christian. You know, so the moment an idea finds its way into songs, into literature, into movies, then it becomes widespread. The trouble is, a lot of times people don't pay attention to what they are listening to or what they are watching. So there's hardly any movie you watch now that there's not a gay couple. Hardly. Like hardly. I started looking out for it sometime last year. There is hardly, the movie will be so nice and then you just see one boy loving one boy. And I cringe because what they are doing is that they are selling an idea that this thing is acceptable. But they are not saying it's acceptable. They just leave it there. If you leave it there for 20 years, your children are going to wake up into a world where gay people exist. And then one day your mother will come and your child will come and tell you that I think actually it's boys I like. Oh. Yeah, that's part of the reasons why we need to learn these things. It is so that we can brainwash our children. You know brainwash?
Yeah.
People on the other side of religion use it for us, that we are brainwashing. That's the plan. It's to brainwash them. It's to ensure that they are indoctrinated. Because what we hit them, we don't even know it. We don't even know it yet. I think it was last week. I saw there's a series on Netflix now. That is going to be launched sometime in September, where the girl she's a ballet dancer or something. I'm not even sure she's up to 7, like 6 years old or something. Oh, they're 11 years old, right? And they are lesbians or something. Like, this girl began her journey to find her sexuality, whatever nonsense that is.
Yeah, that's
Right? You know, and your child is going to have a phone and is going to have the Netflix app on the phone. Do you get the point? I'm saying that we're in a bad fight. We're in a bad fight. Unfortunately, one of the strongest tools that the people on the other side have is the media, contemporary culture. That's part of the reasons why I look out for these things in movies. I'm watching The Lord of the Rings again, right? And you will not believe I can preach 52 sermons from that movie. Yeah, one per week. Oh, Lord of the Rings.
The problem is if I watch it again, I might not see it.
Look out for it. You look out for it. I've been watching The Lord of the Rings deliberately for the past 4 years. I mean deliberately. Like every year I'll sit down with the three of them and watch. And I'm looking out for how... Do you know why I do that? It's because people know the movie. If I want to explain certain concepts and I can show you the thing in The Lord of the Rings, it's going to be easy for you to get it, right? So it's part of my obligation to ensuring that people learn the truth, to be able to break it down to what they can relate with, for example. You know? So I'm very deliberate with movies. When I see movies, I'm not just seeing the movie. I'm looking out for something. I'm a preacher, it's my job. I have to look out for things that will help my life. Right? So, I'm sorry if you don't like movies, but you're stuck with me. You can't.
I do not like movies.
So, you just don't like proper movies.
What that you call that I don't get it, and then you give me that.
Okay, so let me tell you the case I wanted to make from. It was Infinity War actually. So in Infinity War, at some point, Doctor Strange does his time thing, and then he sees 14 million possibilities, right? And then he sees that they only win in one. Right? He sees that they only win in one. And when he traveled through time and he saw all of those 14 million possibilities, one of the things he probably saw was that Thanos got all of the stones. Thanos snapped his finger. Thanos killed half of the population, and it was that way for 5 years. Right? But what the guy saw was the end of Endgame. He saw the end from the beginning. He saw the end of Endgame, right? Sorry, but you cope. So he saw the end of Endgame, but at the time when it was Iron Man, he was with Iron Man, when he had to give up the stone to Thanos, Iron Man didn't get it. He didn't understand what was happening. Do you remember that point where they were going to he was going to kill Iron Man? Thanos was going to kill Iron Man. Am I right? Yeah, I think I'm right. Thanos was going to kill Iron Man, and then Doctor Strange had to. Avery, you understand? You know the movie. Tell us. Okay, so Thanos was going to kill Iron Man, and then he asked for the stone. If not, he was going to kill him. Doctor Strange had seen the end, and he knew that it was Iron Man that would help their lives. Right? So you cannot allow Iron Man to die. When Doctor Strange gave Thanos the stone, Iron Man was confused. Like, what's going on? Why would you do that? Why would you give him the stone to save my life? This is what we mean by human limitations. Doctor Strange knew something that Iron Man could not know. Do you get the point? And we are saying that if God is God, then we cannot say that we know everything that is in the mind of God. And we cannot say that it is improbable that God lacks sufficient reasons to allow evil to happen. Simply because we don't know enough. We are limited. We are very, very, very finite. It's so bad we don't even know what will happen in the next 10 minutes. We don't. Like, we don't know anything. Like, as a human, you are helpless. You can die this night and you will not know. That's how bad it is. So, on what grounds can you make a statement that says God can do this or God cannot do this, or God has enough sufficient reasons or God does not? You can't make that kind of statement. That's what we mean by human limitation. We're not trying to appeal to the mystery of God. God is mysterious. No, we're trying to appeal to our finitude. And we are saying that we cannot make those kinds of statements. Right? Because it's very possible that God has sufficient reasons, but we cannot know them. Do you get the point? So that's number one. Number two. The full scope of the evidence. So when we say, so the people that use this whole improbable thing, a lot of times they don't fully grasp what they are talking about. Because the moment you say something is improbable, you are talking about probabilities, there has to be a denominator. Right? There has to be a denominator. The moment you are talking of a probability, it has to be maybe 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1,000,000, 1 in 100, right? So there has to be a denominator when you are talking about probabilities. So when you are talking of the full scope of the evidence, is it improbable that God exists in the light of the full scope of the evidence? Remember that this objection against God's existence because of evil is not the only positive or negative thing that speaks for God. We have other arguments. We have at least 20 other arguments that speaks to the fact that God exists. So, if we say that it is improbable that God exists on the strength of the fact that evil exists, we're not going to ask you, what of the Kalam cosmological argument? What of Leibniz? What of Anselm's? Right? What of fine-tuning? What of the arguments from design? What of DNA? Did you get the point? When we're talking of probabilities, we are talking of probabilities in a context. So if you say that it is improbable, you are going to have to bring this your evidence and consider it relative to other evidences that exist. See me, I'm saying evidences like our friend Indagoski. So what you need to do is you need to pile up the lines of evidence that exist, and then you need to bring your objection and see if it is improbable. And it is not. In the light of other arguments that exist for God's existence, in the light of other lines of evidence that exist for God's existence, the objection from evil does not shake it at all. Do you get the point? Wait, does anybody not understand? If you don't understand this thing, let me know. Do you understand? Do you understand? You understand? Avril, do you get it? Juliet, you get it? Okay. So, what we are saying is this, that the moment you start talking of probability, you do that in maths now. Let's say there is a black ball and then there are 100 red balls, right? So, if you had 100 red balls in a bag, or if you had 99 red balls in a bag, and you had one black ball in the bag, what's the probability that you pick out that one black ball from that bag? The probability is 1 in 100. Right? Because the total number of balls are 100, but the black ball is 1. What's the probability that you pick out a red ball? The probability is 99 in 100. So it's like 99 over 100. You can't say there is a black ball in a bag. What's the probability that you pick the black ball? The probability is 1. You're going to pick the black ball. It's 1 in 1. It's 1. You're going to pick the black ball. You know, you are going to, there's no, unless you don't put your hand inside that bag to pick a ball. But if you do, you are going to pick that black ball. It means that every time you're using the word probable, improbable, you are talking about that thing in the light, there should be a denominator, right, that you are relating this thing against. So you're saying something like, it is improbable that God exists in the light of all of these arguments, except that the people that make these kinds of statements, they don't say in the light of all of these kinds of arguments. They just say it is improbable that God exists in the light of evil. You have succeeded in saying nothing. Because for you to make this claim, you have to juxtapose it with all of the other arguments that support God's existence and show that in the light of this objection, all of these arguments are not probable enough to sustain the fact that God exists. Do you get it now? Okay. So that what we need to do now when someone says it's improbable, number one, we talk about human limitations. Number two, we say that we have other arguments for God's existence. There are many arguments for God's existence. There are like 20 at least. There are some that we've not even touched at all, like the arguments from consciousness. There's the arguments from mathematics. right? That God exists. Yes, there's an argument from mass. Because mass exists, therefore God has to exist. There's that argument. There's the one from consciousness. Because you are conscious, you're a conscious being, therefore God has to exist. We've not looked at them at all. You can't do all of the arguments, right? You can read up on them, but the point would be that when someone says this kind of stuff, you're now going to have to show him that there are many other arguments for God's existence, and you have to show me how this objection of yours makes it improbable that God exists in the light of all of these arguments. And it just doesn't do it. Do you get the point? It just doesn't do it. Do you get it now? So when you say something like improbable, so you see they said impossible at first. We show them that it's false. Now say, okay, improbable, or it's not likely. You know, at that point you are stepping into territory where you have to relate this thing you are saying to other things. And it's your job to show the person that, okay, this thing you have said might make sense, but let's consider the other lines of evidence. Let's consider the other lines of evidence to see if it is true that it is improbable. Do you get the point? Alright, so that's the second objection to this probabilistic argument. The third objection is the doctrines of Christianity, which I've talked about a bit. But part of the teaching of Christianity is about the fact that God is not just interested in your happiness, God is interested in your holiness, kind of, you know. God is not just about making you happy, God is about making you perfect. And if perfection is going to come by suffering, then it's fine. You see, there's this portion in the Bible. You see, because now we're stepping into Christian territory, so we can pull it out. There's this portion in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Paul says that we know that our light affliction works for us a far more exceeding weight of glory. If you see the things that Paul called light affliction, you think that the guy was not okay. Paul lists a lot of stuff, and then he calls it light affliction. Light affliction. Light affliction. But again, the reason why he can make that kind of statement is because he is relating it to something. So, relative to the glory that has been set before us, this thing is light. It's not because on its own, if you look at it on its own, it's not like it's not heavy. But when you put it against, when you set it against what has been set before us, then this thing is light. Do you get? And you probably know what I'm talking about. Sometimes, maybe your phone is bad and you're saving up to buy a new phone, right? You want to buy the latest iPhone. They told you that it's 100,000 naira. So you're saving 1k every day. But you see, if you save 1k every day, you're not going to have lunch. So, you started fasting. On top of iPhone, you started 100-day fast. So, you started fasting and all of that. And then maybe somebody now asks you one day, what's the problem? Why are you getting lean? You're getting slimmer. What's happening? And then you're like, just don't worry. Do you get it? You don't understand. That's the statement. You don't understand. What you're telling yourself is that 100 days. 100 days. This thing is light affliction with respect to the glory that is coming. Right? And the Bible teaches that very clearly. So the Bible actually teaches that God can permit suffering because there is a far more exceeding weight of glory that is coming. So when you say it's not probable, in Christianity it's actually probable. Right? In Christianity it's actually probable. Now, before we go to the emotional version, maybe we should even do that next time. Before we go to the emotional version, I like to say that the presence of evil is actually one of the proofs for God's existence. And I'm going to tell you how. I mean, this is the way I'm thinking about it, right? I think that Ravi has said this at some point too. I think I've heard him say something like this. If evil is evil, The only way we can recognize that evil is by a standard. And the only way we can have a standard is if God exists. Right? So, we cannot recognize evil if God did not exist. Right? We cannot recognize evil if God did not exist. So they are like, okay, yeah, we may not be able to recognize evil if God did not exist, but we can recognize suffering even if God does not exist. I'm like, yeah, we can recognize suffering if God does not exist. But if God does not exist, who is to say that suffering is a bad thing? Why is suffering a bad thing if God does not exist? If we are just animals, I mean, you kill chickens every day, right? But when people are killed in southern Kaduna, our heart bleeds. What's the difference? The difference is there's a difference between the human and the chicken. That difference is the image of God that is in the human, that is not in the chicken. Right? And I mean, nobody complains that chickens die. Nobody complains that chickens are killed. In some parts of the world, animals even have rights. You know, Abby? Oh, you know that in the US, your dog has a right. Your dog has certain rights, right? There are animals that have rights in... Oh, really? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So, your dog can have a right, but if you kill a dog, they do not tell you that it is immoral. They just tell you it is illegal. Nobody says it is immoral to kill a dog. Do you get it? It is just said to be illegal. But when you kill a human being, it is not just illegal, it is immoral. And there's a difference between illegal and immoral, or legal and moral. It's part of the reasons why it is wrong to have a law that says if you are caught as a homosexual, you go to jail. It is wrong. You can't legalize it. You're looking at me like that. It is. If we are Christians, it would mean that we will not enforce our beliefs on people. Yeah, we preach to them and hope they change, but we don't enforce our beliefs on people. You can't create a law that says, if we catch you having sex with a man as a man, you're going to go to jail. On what ground is that a crime? What? The only reason it's a crime is because we have said it's a crime. The man is happy, the other man is happy. The problem is the women. Who go marry all the women's? Did you hear Indaboski say that? I should stop talking about this guy too much. So that's the difference. So you can have you have that. It is obviously immoral for a man to sleep with a man, but it is not illegal. I mean, it's not. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, really, because these people are both adults and they are consenting. When a child is involved, that's a whole different ball game. It should be illegal for an adult to sleep with a child. It should be illegal. It's immoral, but it should be illegal. But you see, when two adults, grown men, both of them are 24, they say they like themselves. Why should you put something in the law that restrains their behavior? Because if we are truly Christians, we will not force our beliefs on people. That's the reason why Jesus did not allow his disciples to call down fire on that village. They were traveling through, and then Jesus wanted to go through the village, and the people said, no, Jesus, you're not going to pass through the village. And the disciples came to Jesus, you know them, the sons of thunder, and they came to Jesus and they said, Baba, these guys don't want us to pass, so should we call down fire like Elijah did? They were not asking God, or they were not asking Jesus for ability. They were asking for permission. If Jesus had said yes, those guys would have called down fire, they would have roasted the village. Simply because they did not allow Jesus to pass. What they wanted to do was they wanted to use the power that they now had to enforce Jesus on people. You don't do that. Like say I'm preaching to you, you don't want to hear. You don't want to hear. You'll be mad for 2 weeks. That's not the spirit of Christ. I know that we celebrate it there are some men of God that make it sound like it's a good thing, right? Oh yeah, I saw the 600 years. It's not the spirit of Christ. That's why we apologize for the crusades. As Christians, we apologize for the crusades. The crusades happened, and they are very unfortunate. They happened, right? Christians did it. Christians converted people to Christianity forcefully, or you'll be killed. Right? There was the Spanish Inquisition. All of that happened, and we apologize for it as Christians. We don't endorse it by any means, because the fact that something is immoral does not make it illegal. If we had a purely Christian society, what we will be trying to do will be to change the hearts of people and not just their behavior. Unfortunately, the law cannot change their hearts. It can only change their behavior. Right? So there are some things that are moral, that are immoral, but should not be illegal. There are some things that are illegal that are not necessarily immoral. For example, I'll give you an example. If I have a company, right, and one of my staff should dupe you, you know that I'm culpable. I can be sent to jail because my staff, I had no idea that it was going to happen. I didn't know, right? But I'm culpable on some level. And so I'm sent to jail for something I didn't know about. It's not immoral, but it's illegal for your staff to do wrong stuff. I mean, it's not immoral for you to not know that your staff was going to do wrong stuff. How are you supposed to know? But you're culpable. Did you get? So I am saying that we, as Christians, you don't enforce your beliefs on people. You try to ensure that they change from their heart. Right? Like, for example, Juliet is wearing makeup. I don't like makeup. What do? It's simple. I make sure I don't marry her. Do you get it? It's simple. I can't call Juliet and start telling Juliet that she's wrong for wearing makeup, and it's not, because the way she is now with makeup, she looks more like Jesus than she did yesterday. I know you don't believe it, but she does. Jesus is happy as she's fine like this. God is happy. You are the one that is not happy, right? And it's okay to not be happy. You don't like it. Don't marry her. If she was doing something that was obviously immoral, then as a Christian you have a responsibility to speak to her. Do you get the point? But if it is a matter of preference, you don't put it down people's throats. You don't do that. There was a time that I wanted to do something. Let me tell you. Because I eventually did not do it, but I think I've hinted it to some people. You know how? I know you did it, so I'm going to say it.
What?
Yeah, you did it. Wait, you will soon hear it. You know how on your birthday, it's your birthday now, so all of us put your picture on our status. You now screenshot my picture and put it up. The one I uploaded of you, you screenshot it, you put it on your status. You screenshot his own, you put it on your status. You know, then maybe I now come back and now screenshot the fact that you are celebrating the fact that I was celebrating you, and put it up on my own status. It was, is that not, you did it. Everybody that does that here, I usually notice that. Yeah. So one day I wanted to write about it on my status. As I was typing, I realized that there's nothing wrong in this.
Thank you.
It's my preference. I don't think it's a good use of sense and data, but it is what it is. Some people like it. Do you get? And nobody's going to die because they are doing it. So I cleaned the status and faced my front.
Actually.
Because as a Christian, that's what you do. Do you get? Maybe Avril doesn't wear trousers, right? It would be wrong for her to enforce it on every other person. It's not proper. You don't do that. So, especially because when a man sleeps with a man, it's not like the world will catch fire or something. Yeah, the world will catch fire on a different level, right? But between both of them, they are not hurting you. So it is immoral. It is immoral. It is immoral, right? But it's not necessarily, or it should not necessarily be illegal. It should not, from a Christian standpoint, it should not be illegal. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be illegal. But then the point I was making is that the difference between immoral and illegal now, with respect to killing a dog or shooting an exotic bear, right? Killing an exotic bear, and killing a human being, is that when you shot that bear and killed it, it was illegal. It was not immoral. Because the difference is the fact that a human is not a penguin. That's the difference. And the difference lies in the fact that humans are image bearers of God and penguins are not. Do you understand the point? So, you want to be thinking about these things, because these things boil down, they come down like that, right? Like this example I just gave. You don't want to be seen to be pushing down your preferences down people's throats. It's not a Christian thing to do. It's a different thing if what they are doing is immoral. If what they are doing is immoral, then you want to ensure that you call them out on it as lovingly as possible, you know. But then, if it's not immoral, what are you just don't like human hair. I mean, you don't like attachments. You don't like the kind of wig that, you don't like it. Close your eye. You know, you don't like Marvel movies. It's okay to not like Marvel movies. I'm just not going to marry you.
What?
Yes. Is that deep? I'm angry. It's that deep. Okay, so when I'm married to you, who am I supposed to be watching it with? Messi what? You can't be watching Nollywood movies and think that it's an irreconcilable difference. I'm sorry, we have to go our separate ways. You said?
Just a movie.
It's not just which movie? You used to watch Messi Johnson. No, it's okay if you say it. Loxy, that's what you watch.
Always playing.
Don't wonder she was saying she watches movies, but she just doesn't know what we're talking about. You know, so an ideal Christian society will allow people to express whatever they want to express, as long as it is not immoral, while trying to change their hearts. So in an ideal Christian society, we're going to have some people that are gay. Yeah. We're going to keep talking to them to ensure that they stop being gay, but we're not going to make it a matter of law that if we catch you, you go to jail. No, we won't do that. Do you get the point? It's like how some people are making a case for the fact that they don't want to wear face masks. Now, this was in the US. They don't want to wear face masks. They don't want to sanitize. They don't want to do social distancing. And the reason is because if you have the coronavirus in the US, you're going to pay for the treatment. Yeah, it's not like here, you pay for your treatment. So if you don't have insurance, you're dead. If you don't have insurance, it's better to just die than to recover. Because you hear that they use $90,000 to treat you, and they'll show you the bill, they'll show you the inventory. This is how we spent the $90K. So come on, where will you get $90,000 from? Right? But so some people start making the case that they pay for their treatment, right? So they don't want to prevent it. They don't want to. Of course you can't, except that there was a twist. The twist was that if you get the coronavirus, it's not only you that is going to suffer for it. It's going to affect the community. You can pass it on to other people. And so that's what, this thing is still in court though. This case is still in court. That people are saying, people sued the government for the lockdown. Because in the constitution, you're not supposed to have a lockdown for more than a month. And that's supposed to be in emergency situations like war and maybe a natural disaster and all of that. And then the government prolonged the lockdown for more than a month and people took the government to court. That's a country that people are thinking. Abio, now try it. Maybe the other one, they said that El Rufai will never become president. They charged the man to court. You know, so
for making the statement.
Yeah. Yes, hate speech. Why are you talking like that? They called some very funny charges. There were 3 charges, very, very funny. He simply said El-Rufai will never be president, and he was charged to court in KD.
And there's a bill now that you can't insult senators, president. Yeah.
You can imagine. This is obviously what a Christian society will not be. A Christian society, you'll be able to insult all the government officials, insult all of them. Like, you see the way Trump receives insult. Like, at some point, in fact, right now, I've stopped following Trevor Noah because I used to like him, but then he just became very expletive with the way he insults Trump and all. And I can get it if you don't like the man and all of that, but don't become insultive. It's supposed to be beneath normal human beings. Right? But that's how it's supposed to be. You should be able to look the president in his face and insult him if he's a Christian. And nothing will happen. That's what a Christian community would look like. Or that's what a Christian society would look like. You know why? Because of the presence of free will. So, what we need to do is we need to strive to change the hearts of people and not just their actions. And laws do not change any hearts. It's the same reason why the 10 Commandments could not work. Because laws do not change any hearts. If people are going to be changed, there needs to be the influence of a person. It is personal influences that cause people to change. This is exactly why in the New Covenant we have a relationship with Jesus. In the New Covenant we're introduced to a person. It's why in the New Covenant the Holy Spirit is ushered into your heart. It's because laws don't change anybody. The only way to change hearts is by personal influences. You know? So that's what a Christian society would look like. And I don't even know how I got to this point, but I hope that helps. Next week we're going to look at how to respond to the emotional problem. And then I'll probably take questions around natural evil, because there are a lot of questions around natural evil. A lot of questions. People talk about insects. You know, there are certain insects that eat other insects. Like, there's some very gruesome stuff that happen at the micro level when you look at insects and all of that. There's some really brutal stuff that some people try to use as a proof for the fact that natural evil is an impasse, right? And it should make us doubt God's existence. But basically, that issue is actually an issue of design. It's really not an issue of evil. We'll see it next week. It's more of an issue of design. But saying that the designer was a bad designer is not equal to saying that the designer does not exist. Right? So you can say he was a bad designer. It's okay. But you can't say he does not exist. You know? But we'll look at that next week. So we'll do the emotional version of the problem. How do you respond to someone? Someone tells you that I'm in pain. I lost my daughter to osteosarcoma. And I saw her suffer in pain as the cancer kept eating her up. And she was 4. She couldn't have done anything wrong. And she didn't even die at birth. She had to suffer that long before she died. What is the Christian response to that? We have an answer. Right? And we'll look at that next week. So are there any questions? Ask your question, Long T. Don't be shy. Ask your question. Even if it's about a movie, just ask.
I actually love movies. Movies are fine.
Nollywood movies?
No. As just what was available.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
That's what Kiss is talking about.
Okay. So now that you know that Marvel movies and other real movies are within your reach, you would reach out, yeah?
I'll show color.
Amen. Amen. Alright, so did you have a question? I thought I saw you raising your hand. Okay.
No.
Right.
Oh, I was clicking on something.
Oh, this guy, you're blessed. Oh, wow. Alright, no other question, yeah? Okay.